What? I see the scanner.
There are many reasons why an endeavor as complex as creating a huge open world video game sometimes doesn't pan out the way it should or could. Absolutely millions of things that can and will go wrong at the best of times, no matter how much hard work goes in. Add in the stress of your country being illegally invaded during the development of your project, and a whole bunch of other issues to boot, and it's not hard to fathom why Stalker 2, as much as we can see the love and hard work on screen at all times, has turned out to be one of the worst things we've played this console generation.
But I have been to Pripyat, and this will pay for one ride.
What?
It's obviously been a ton of work for the dev team to get it to the point that it's at right now, and we are willing them to come good in the end. But boy, oh boy, does this long-awaited sequel need an absolute ton of work to get it anywhere near decent. And that's hard to say. It brings us zero joy as huge fans of the original, as fans who love the slow-moving difficulty, weirdness, and Euro-janky goofiness of this series. We wanted this to be a nice big surprise at the end of our 2024, an irradiated dream to dig into over the festive period. But alas, what we've got is an almost overwhelming mess. From the get-go, Stalker 2 feels like something that has no idea what it's meant to, or even wants to be. We've got a huge, and oftentimes beautiful, chunk of Chernobyl wasteland. It's very fancy to look at, and very precise in its real-world details. None of this is in doubt. It's one of the most impressive open worlds we've roamed, aesthetically. It's dramatic and dark, brooding in all the right ways. And when a storm rolls in, man, it sure does look incredible at times. However, this is also a wasteland that's got almost nothing of worth to offer, even to the most fervent of Stalker fans, really.
Isn't it beautiful?
It's a lot of trash. Food waste, human waste, you name it.
In sitting down to play the thing, in attempting to settle into a rhythm or get into its various systems, we're met with nothing but badly executed ideas. Dire AI, awful dungeon design, a bemusing artifact system, bland guns, rubbish anomalies, cheap and annoying mutant attacks, disappointing loot stashes, atrocious voice acting, bargain bin writing, and a core narrative that is almost incomprehensibly terrible. That's only for starters, by the way. The much vaunted A-Life system, this clever mechanic whereby NPCs live out their own routines, get into inter-faction gunfights and all that good stuff, the stuff that generates endless fun in a world like this, is absolutely 100% missing in action. It's nowhere to be seen. Okay, maybe you'll run into a bunch of guys fighting with each other, sure, but that's it. A messy gunfight, usually involving a bunch of enemies who simply materialize out of thin air in front of you, with no real feeling that there's any intelligence at play. Even in run-of-the-mill combat, the many enemies you face here rarely get anywhere near clever. So the issues go much deeper than stuff that could be added in or fixed later. The artifact system, whereby you find artifacts and anomalies and then slot them into your gear to add buffs and debuffs, is another good example of this. We expected to be collecting tons of these, using the game's currently useless scanner to scoop them all up, and then writing you lots of big tasty guides on how to find them all. But we've got about 6 in our possession, none of them do anything interesting, and we pretty much found them all by accident. They're in the game, we've no doubt, but after 40 wretched hours of playing, we've given up on being interested in them. They feel pointless, and we don't care at this stage. This goes for most of your gear though, as when an invisible spark of magic radiation energy can zap you to death in one hit, without any notice, rhyme, or reason in this all-new zone, there's not much point in prepping for anything. This is also a zone that seems at odds with what we thought it would, or should be. A world that, far from making things tough for you, is crammed to bursting point with guns, ammo, medicine, bandages, enough gear to outfit a platoon of stalkers. We've been dropping mountains of gear and bullets for crying out loud, just to stay underneath the over-encumbrance point. It never feels like you're struggling for food or guns. In fact, if anything, you're struggling to find things to shoot with them. Struggling to find anywhere to sell them even, because finding a vendor will likely take you hours of dying, bugging out, glitching into things, fighting invisible enemies, and getting lost in bland underground bases. Now, to be positive for a moment, what's here still has some promise, amazingly. There's still magic in moments where you creep your way slowly into some enemy encampment and use stealth attacks to brutalize everyone. Sometimes the bugs and annoyances, the cheap deaths and never-ending nothingness of the main missions give way to a perfect storm of atmosphere and danger, and then you're briefly in the zone as you expect it might be this time around. These moments are so fleeting though, and they get more so as the game goes on. We can't see how it'll improve in any big or meaningful way either. There's just so much wrong at the moment. The gear is bland and monotonous. The guns feel okay, sure, but they are nothing to get excited about. There's a depth to the attachment and upgrades, yeah, but even tens of hours in, we've had very few of these things in our possession. We also took way longer than expected with this game because of bugs and performance issues, and the fact that we seem to be grounded to a halt most of the time due to some unforeseen issue that messed up our mission or had us restarting and reloading old saves.
What did you find?
Even on Xbox Series X, this one is a mess of bugs, from stuttering and frame rate hitches that manage to persist with VRR switched on, to missing NPC models and egregious loading times upon every single death. We've had entire groups of enemies blink into existence in front of us, for crying out loud. Rival factions materializing into a scene and turning on us en masse before we can even prep our defense. This is A-Life. We've also died countless times from radiation that didn't show up on our little radiation meter. Although the compass barely works on the UI here, often even forgetting to show the distance to your next objective. So that's not really a surprise. Speaking of the UI and the menus and inventories in general, it's all fairly appalling. Managing your gear feels designed for PC circa 2004 and is incredibly over-fussy and slow. The on-screen UI, in particular the managing of quick access spots, is farcical too. You have 4 slots, 2 left and 2 right on the D-pad, and you'll need to long press a key to access 2 of these. As you use items, the slot contents are moved around, so often you long press to heal and the first aid has moved, so you die. But seriously though, that happens. There are .dll file names hovering over dead enemies and items. One of our outfits is a loaf of bread. This one is apparently fairly common, and floating bodies are commonplace. Honestly, there's no real point continuing. The fact that A-Life doesn't work properly, and the fact that your enemies and other threats will spawn in behind you, killing you from a spot you'd already meticulously checked and cleared, this stuff is game-breaking at the end of the day. For a Stalker game to mess these points up, it's very hard to see where you're meant to take enjoyment as a player. There's nothing worth fighting, nothing worth exploring for, no way to dig in and play the role in a satisfying way. We know there's always a bit of to and fro over this sort of janky, tough game. The hardcore fans will tell you that you just can't deal with the brutality of the zone, that your deaths are skill issues and so on. But we've served our time with Stalker, and plenty of adventures that have walked the same ultra tough path before it. This isn't about skill problems or a lack of ability. It's a poorly made product, an experience that fails to provide fun for your hard-earned money, and something that you would never, not in a million years, recommend to a newcomer or gamer who isn't knowledgeable about the franchise. And that says a whole lot. If you want to give us a big, hard game world to survive and stalk in, if you want us to engage and indulge in tough and time-consuming stuff like this, you're going to need to ensure that every death is fair. Here, almost every single death is the exact opposite, and that's unforgivable. We've also found the wasteland to be almost entirely devoid of life upon further investigation. Strike out across its map to uncover new regions, walk away from where the narrative is taking you, and you'll likely find yourself running across very pretty but totally empty scenery. It's mind-boggling. In fact, just how little there is to see beyond the promise of the real-world tourist attractions of the area or get interested in. A big, empty, boring world with a smattering of messy camps and enemy-infested areas. No matter how good it looks, there's no getting away from the reality that it's almost impossible to have fun here. There's nothing to get hooked into, unless you like role-playing an accident-prone Wally of a Stalker. There's tons more to rake over. The enemies have no tactical nows. The mutants, which should always be a highlight to fight, are the worst kind of invisible, cheating, cheap bullet sponge annoyances to deal with. The story is appalling for the first 20 hours before some things, still boring, start to happen. We won't ruin any of that here, of course, except to say that there are a few nods to the original game for fans that managed to stomach the task of getting that far. Main missions are often very hard to follow, with nonsensical conversations doing little to help. And in running from one to the next, we found ourselves completely unaware of what the hell we were meant to be doing. There are choice-driven moments crammed in, but these really seem a bit much, a bridge too far, especially when even the basic stuff is barely holding together. None of these woes are helped by an early game plot about scanners, which is beyond boring as a way to introduce the game's janky-ass factions. Side activities are underwhelming. This is a big, scary zone, so you don't get the usual glut of open-world fun and distractions. We are all here for the strict adherence to a vibe if it's done well. Most off-piece stuff takes place in the form of NPC missions that cover fetch quests and turgid camp invasions, all only serving to further lay bare the mess that is the combat with this game's brain-dead enemies. It's been one of the biggest disappointments we can remember in quite some time. And listen, this is such a shame, especially when you catch the odd whiff of OG Stalker magic here and there. But this is an Anthem cyberpunk level mess, really. There's no other way to dice it, in how hard it fumbles what should be a fascinating experience. Thank goodness we can all try it on Game Pass in the meantime, and keep our fingers crossed that the incoming hotfixes and larger patches can get it where it needs to be in the future.
Tough guy, are ya? Get this jackass, boys!
Skiff, good to see you.
Stalker 2 is a pretty big mess. This is a badly judged game in almost every way. The new zone is incredible to behold at times for sure, but it's a world at odds with itself, full of gear and guns, but with precious little in the way of enemies that challenge you to use them. The story is terrible, the A-Life system is AWOL, and the acting and writing are atrocious. It's cheap in how it kills without warning, is packed full of bugs and performance issues on Xbox Series S and X, and is devoid of mostly anything that makes it feel worth playing for a very long time.
Although, looks like it's going straight to hell right now.
So there you have PJ O'Reilly's review of Stalker 2, awarding the game a 4 out of 10. Now, I will say I've personally been having a better time with the game than I'll add, but the bugs and glitches desperately need fixing. Stalker 2 is clearly a product of a disrupted development cycle, and I can only empathize with GSC Game World. There's still magic tucked away in this one, and the longer I play, the more I start to find it. Let us know your plans for Stalker 2 in the comments, and all that's left to say is bye-bye for now. Cheerio!